Welcome to the Daily Objective. In the last weeks, a group called Insulate Britain has been captured the headlines in the UK for their disruptive protest. So what they do is they stand in traffic and they basically block traffic. And there have been some scenes with angry drivers trying to remove them. And you could say it's just one Britain has environmental groups engaging in direct action. But I think there are some interesting questions to ask. First of all, what is this group? What are their claims? Because their claims is a very interesting story in itself. But also, many people wonder, why is it that environmentalists consistently take direct action that in a way does not seek to engage, but more to alienate the public? And we are going to discuss this. So with me today, Jonathan Honig. Hi, Jonathan.
Great to be with you, Nikos. Yeah, I mean, I was unaware of this particular group in the UK operating, but when I took with your permission, we'll quickly show some of this video. It's probably troubling, particularly troubling video. I mean, this is a. You can see, you can hear it.
That's it. Push them up the road.
You know, these people are literally blocking the road.
Push them up the fucking road.
I'm not joking. My son needs to get to school.
Push them up the
You've
road.
got people trying to get to school, get to work.
Punch her up.
My son is 11 and he needs to get to school. My son is 11. He needs to get to school and I need to get to work. So move out of the way.
You know, you have people who are trying to live their lives, and you know, protester, I think, is pretty generous, Nikos. In fact, you know, Rand talked about this. I want to read it all right now, but she talks about this in Textbook of Americanism, that on public roads, no one has the right to block the public roads for any reason, including political protests. So, you know, I think you're very generous in calling this a protest. To me, it's a menace. And it seems like these environmental so-called activists are escalating it further and further up in the UK.
So before we get to the criticism, let's give them first a hearing. So let's try to give the benefit of the doubt. So this group has two aims, and someone would ask, why are they called Insulate Britain? Insulate from what? So their claim is that, look, a big percentage of the emissions, the CO2 emissions in the UK comes from housing, from heating your house, from the energy needs of their house. And the actual number is around 15%. So the idea is, if we want to reach our goals in reducing emission, a goal for which the government has committed itself, then we need some very radical action. What is the action they propose? First is, by the year 2025, so within 4 years, the government to insulate every social housing that is in the UK. So social housing is houses where if you are relatively poor, you can live there with help from the government. We're talking about 4 million of these houses. And then by the year 2030, they want to insulate every single house in the UK, every single house. So this would create, they claim, and this is the first question I have for you. So the usual pushback they get is about the cost and the practicalities of this, because of course, no one is going to challenge them or on their premise or on their rights to suggest these things. So most people focus on the practicalities and they say, look, we understand this is very, noteworthy and this is very important, but what about the cost? And the cost, according to some research, would be anywhere near £500 billion. Some say a bit more, others say a bit less. Not to mention any other disruption. For example, if someone needs to redo basically your house, to renovate your house so that it's more energy efficient, you'll have to be living somewhere else for weeks. So this is not something that, you know, they just put a double glaze, you can be back in a day. This is something that's going to take a week. So this is a huge process, and the cost would be huge. Now, their answer to this is that they've consulted some research, and they say, number one, it will be cheaper if the government does it. And number two, that this is going to create 300 to 500,000 new jobs. So this is going to boost the economy because there's going to be a boost in construction, and there are going to be people who will have to accommodate this transition. So they say, don't worry too much about the cost. What is £500 billion? We spend so much money anywhere. and this is going to create hundreds of thousands of green jobs. So what is the comment of Jonathan, the economist, to this?
Well, I mean, Nikos, it starts with the problem if you say, our goal of reducing emissions, to borrow a line from Rand, check your premises here. I mean, this notion that we have a goal to reducing emissions, I think is faulty on its face. I mean, this is a government regulation, government restrictions that is hindering people's, and I don't live in the UK, but hindering people's right to use and heat their home however they want or don't want to heat it in that case. So, it's not just a cost. I mean, Nikos, we've heard it here in the States so many times of how, government spending creates jobs. It's a multiplier effect, so-called, but, it's actually a multiplier destructive effect because every dollar that's spent in pounds or in US dollars, of course, has to be either taxed, borrowed, or taken out of the private economy. But I tell you, I mean, the real issue, I think, shouldn't be the objection in dollars. Because, Nikos, if we say, oh, it's too expensive, they'll come up with some spreadsheet that'll say it's, we have to say that it's immoral on its face. And I think that's what you asked about what's unique about the environmentalists. I mean, they have, unfortunately, the moral high ground. And when I see these jackasses sitting in the middle of the street, I think they probably think they're Rosa Parks. And, you might remember Rosa Parks and maybe some very famous civil rights. Well, she was a woman who basically rejected the bus driver, said, get in the back of the bus. She said, no, I'm sitting right here. And, that was a big part of the wonderful, the very important civil rights. But she didn't block the bus, Nikos. She didn't lie down in front of the bus, and she didn't violate anyone else's rights in the process. And I think that's exactly what these environmentalists, they can pass out leaflets, they can drum up support, they can take out ads in the Guardian or other type of newspapers. But the fact that they're trying to get that point across by blocking people traffic, I mean, I don't want to be macabre, but you imagine how many, ambulances might have been stalled because the environmentalists are so, but of course their goal isn't.
There was such a case. There were two such sad stories. The one was that allegedly someone had a stroke, and because of the delay, the stroke left some permanent damage. The other story, and there's a video of this story, there's a woman who is pleading for them to let her pass because she wants to visit her sick mother who was admitted to the hospital. And I mean, it's too heartbreaking. Even I don't like watching these things. And here comes the most important.
The sacrifice is just implied in that, right? Is that you're here to sacrifice for the environment, and that's what,
exactly.
And Nikos, some of these headlines. I mean, here's this head of this Extinction Rebellion saying that he blocked the ambulance with a dying patient in it in order to inspire people to follow his. And it's.
I have a whole section about this guy. So this guy was one of the co-founders. So who is this guy, first of all? This guy is someone called Roger Hallam. He was the co-founder of Extinction Rebellion. He parted ways not because of Extinction Rebellion's aims, but he made a very, how to put it, distasteful, they put it, or something like that comment. He said, well, the Holocaust was just another genocide. There has been so many genocides. So this was what put him outside of the group. So people say he's related to Insulate Britain. He says, I'm not the leader of the group. I'm just someone who is a supporter. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. He's an influential figure. He supports the group. And he said in an interview that, yes, even if someone is dying, it would be worth it. Now, let's answer two questions. First of all, what's the morality that's behind this? But before that, let's answer the layman's question, which is, why are they doing this? Isn't it obvious that this way you alienate people? And here's the important part. You misunderstand what the environmentalists are about. They are first and foremost what I call a glorified lobbying group, because they refer to people who think like them in the government or in what people call the elite. So they might appear as radicals, but again, they are the voice of consciousness, so to speak, if they have one, of people who are already in the government. Remember, Michael Gove gave a sitting to Extinction Rebellion and to Greta Thunberg, and they discussed things. So these groups are basically saying, look, you are with us, you claim you are with us, now act on it. So what is environmentalism mostly about? It is a plea that the way you live, the way you pursue your values is destructive for the environment, number one. Number two, that environment has an inherent value, a value in itself, which does not has to be below the pursuit of your values. How can we know this? See, for example, the groups that were the predecessors of these groups. For example, the anti-roads protest. This was before climate change had become such a big thing. Then the idea was that the creation of highways is going to mess up with the ecosystems, with the goods basically. Or see groups before Insulate Britain, like groups like Plain Stupid, that they would focus on cheap budget airlines. They would go and protest at airports because the idea is you taking the plane to go to Ibiza, you working class poor people who probably drink too much and are not very pleasant to be around, your chasing of the pursuit of your values is what comes to the detriment of nature. So there is no contradiction here. There is no, oh, why are they going against ordinary people? Because ordinary people pursuing their values is what is their problem, is what they consider to be behind the destruction of nature, that we're way too selfish, that we're way too materialistic, and we don't accept to sacrifice for nature. And if we don't accept to sacrifice, someone needs to make us sacrifice. So I want to hear your comment on that, and then I'll go a bit more in details on the program, and actually the program of some of the prominent activists of the movement, because if you see it, it's not something pleasant.
No, it's frightening. And what isn't frightening, however, is the support of our terrific Ayn Rand Center UK community. Sammy is bored again. Thank you. Mary Aline is thank you for all your contributions. Mary Aline says, nothing is cheaper if the government does it. And just because the government does it doesn't mean it's moral anyway. I mean, we always objectivists, we talk about the proper role of government is to protect individual rights. It's not to make you insulate your home. You know, I mean, if insulating your home makes sense, then you'll do it. You'll, as you said, buy the double pane windows or whatnot it is. Sammy's bored again. Chaley, thank you so much for all those contributions. And Nikos, you alluded to it. I think what's important and Rand talked about this definitely in the Return of the Primitive, that the goal of the environmental movement is not man's well-being. Ecology is back then they called it the ecology movement. And she saw this in the early 70s. Ecology as a social principle condemns cities, culture, industry, technology, the intellect, and advocates men's return to nature, to the state of grunting sub-animals digging the soil with their bare hands. So you're right, they don't want you, taking a plane, seeing the world. They want you in your little hovel with your subsistence farming, eating your little grubs and weevils and not impacting the environment. God forbid, because it has value, your life does not.
So Jonathan, someone would say here, look, you find one extremist and you make things up. So let's see, again, this person who was a co-founder of Extinction Rebellion and who is considered a prominent supporter, I'm going to give all the benefit of the doubt, of Insulate Britain. So let's see, let's go to his website. So we are talking about a gentleman called Roger Hallam. So what is he saying is, first of all, notice the language of self-sacrifice. Notice this sentence. The only way we're going to sort ourselves out is if we realize that this is not about us, but about our children and everything we hold sacred. Something bigger than us, about all that we hold to be sacred. We've got to get ourselves and our egos out of the way if we are going to make a change. I repeat, we've got to get ourselves and our egos out the way if we're going to make a change. We are going to have to be willing to make sacrifices. We need a spiritual revolution. How many times we've heard these bromides, but here it gets to the point. We need to get ourselves and our egos out of the way. This is basically mean, don't pursue your values. Don't pursue what you want from life. Take your ego and take your life away. Your life is not the most important thing. Live for something bigger than yourself and basically die for something bigger than yourself. But it goes on. So then he says it's too late for reforms and he calls for a revolution. Again, this is the guy who founded the group that enjoys the legitimacy and the sanction even of the government. So he says, it's too late for reform, so it's time for a revolution. How do we do this revolution? He says two things. The first is quit your job and become a full-time revolutionary. The second is, I quote, a growing alliance of the willing needs to shut down the economy. I repeat, shut down the economy. That is the death machine that is taking us to extinction. Blocking roads and transport infrastructure, city center and financial districts, week after week, until arrests lead to violence by the state and imprisonment. So basically, these guys want to be arrested. This is an old strategy of the New Left. Look, we are arrested. We are the victims here. I continue. Absolute non-violent discipline will need to be maintained so that an internal open democratic culture, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so
can I just ask, is that really non-violent when you sit in the middle of a road? And
you don't understand. For these people, even if you attack cars, okay, I don't know for these people, but for many radicals since the time of the New Left, attacking property is considered non-violent action. So, but wait, it gets worse. So what happens then? Then he envisages, quote, permanent citizens' assemblies to become the new legislative arm of the state. So this is basically like Gotham under Bane's revolution in The Dark Knight Rises. But here's what's going to be the first measures, and here's where it becomes creepy. Banning of flying, of fossil fuel car use, and of non-essential consumption. Let me repeat. Banning of flying, of fossil fuel cars, and of non-essential consumption. What is non-essential consumption? And then he explains, with all ongoing material production designed to last for the longest period possible. Parenthesis, similar to a COVID lockdown scenario, but with local people being able to meet, socialize, and be politically active. This is their vision for life. Banning flights, banning non-essential consumption. Again, what is non-essential according to whom, and non-essentials for whom? So this guy is going to tell you which is essential and non-essential consumption for your life. And of course, while we're at it, and since citizens' assemblies are going to rule, the reappropriation of 90% of the assets of the top 10% income bracket of the population to fund this emergency transformation as would happen in wartime. So, Jonathan.
Rand. I'm looking for my copy of Return of the Primitive. I mean, she identified this, Nikos, decades ago that the ecology movement, the environmental movement, is explicitly anti-capitalist, anti-production, anti-technology, anti-human life. And this, I can't even call him a gentleman. This person's comments about how they need to block the roads, and I have some of the headlines here. They're blocking roads. They're strapping themselves onto the top of jetliners. Arresting, being arrested, blocking trucks, shutting down oil refineries. I mean, Rand talked about exactly this. This is they're anti-industry, anti-capitalism. But what's so tired about it, Nikos? You asked me before we started. You said, "Have I heard of these groups?" And I said to you, "Well, I've heard of not this group, but I've heard of them before because we've seen this story before, Nikos. I mean, back in the 90s and the early 2000s, you remember it was the Earth Liberation Front. That was a group here in the United States. They were attacking Hummers. They were burning SUV parking lots, except like that. And but it just seems like it's escalating more and more because what used to be seen as kind of outside dogma, this environmental movement, is now become accepted religion. As you said, people like Greta get an audience with elected legislators.
Oh, no, sorry. Extinction Rebellion gets also an audience. It's not that Greta gets an audience, but Extinction Rebellion does not. Extinction Rebellion are discussions of many people in high places, the media, politicians. And again, this guy is not a crazy blogger. This guy is among the co-founders of Extinction Rebellion. And the only reason he's out is because in one of his rants, he made this comment about the Holocaust, which was considered, too much even for so it was considered too much, although it wasn't something of the essence. So he said, look, yeah, okay, genocides happen. So it's not that they saw his views about human life or about how society is organized, and he said, okay, this guy is too much. Like, oh, he made this comment, so okay, we can't. This comment was So they said something like it paints Extinction Rebellion in a color that we don't want to, something like that. So not something of the essence, though.
Yeah, I mean, the irony, Nikos, to me, that goes without saying, is that this sacrifice for the future, one need only look at the past to see how effective these predictions among the climate alarmists have been. I mean, they want, 35 years ago, they would have shut down technology because the ice age was coming fast, right? I mean, if these guys had the power, this is going back to the 1970s, they would have shut down factories, spent $1 zillion because of the coming ice age. Well, the ice age never come. None of these predictions ever come true, but they use that as the means to, as you said, get you to sacrifice your life, your happiness for the environmental boogeyman that is an anti-technological, anti-capitalist movement writ large.
And what is the same is that there is indeed a danger from potential danger for climate change, particularly for those who are not equipped to deal with it. And what is the solution of these people? The solution is no one should be equipped to deal with it. Everyone should become poorer. So that's why I cannot take it seriously. I can take very seriously. Someone says, look, I really worry. We need to find some solutions, maybe nuclear energy, whatever. Then, okay, let's discuss. Let's discuss, though, based on the premise that we want to make sure that people have a good life, that people are left to pursue their values, and that we don't want to destroy industrial society or the freedom of people to pursue their values. So for me, this is the minimum to take someone seriously. So I don't want to dismiss the dangers, the potential dangers from our intervention in the environment, which, by the way, has made our life so much better throughout the last centuries, but also it has brought some negative consequences, which could be very serious. How do we deal with them? The same way we deal with all the problems. We put our mind, and we should be free to find solutions. This is not what happens, and this is why I cannot take these people seriously. And again, as you said, this movement comes from, basically these people jump from movement to movement, from campaign to campaign, but the standards are the same: against progress, against the freedom of people to pursue their values. This is the thing that
and
is
against
the standard.
Against man, Nikos. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, we are equipped not to deal with rain and nature, but we're equipped with one thing that matters, is a brain to figure it out. And, in the same week, the climate, cockamamie climate losers are blocking traffic. You've got Jeff Bezos launch a rocket with Captain Kirk on it. The rocket comes down and lands itself. It lands itself. I mean, what man can come up with is unbelievable. So if climate is changing, if the seas are rising, we'll figure it out. Innovative man will figure it out. But as you said, that's not their goal. Their goal is to shut down industry, shut down technology, and get us this. And they're happy. They're happy, Nikos. If, as we said, we're on our subsistence farm, not moving, not just in our little quiet world like we were in the Dark Ages. Who needs a nuclear reactor? We can all just get along with little beeswax candles.
And these days, I'm working on a module I'll be teaching for the Ayn Rand University, for the Objectivist Academic Center next term, on the New Left. And I'm reading again some of the founding fathers of the New Left, people like Marcuse. And he says openly, the fact that capitalism has made it possible for the worker to drive the same car or almost the same car as his boss is something which is bad. And he's writing this in the 60s. Like, there's no climate change in the 60s, but he says this idea of drive, of productivity to conquer nature, it's a problem. And it's a problem which is kind of the motor of capitalism. So it's not that these people one day woke up and they said, wait a minute, there's a problem here. We see that our activity has these effects on the environment, let's fix it. These ideas go back before anyone even knew the term climate change. And again, always the idea is, how do we put human beings into chains? How do we stop them from pursuing their values? And again, go and read Marcuse, go and read Horkheimer, Adorno, how they view progress in very ambivalent terms. And I'm very, very lenient when I say in ambivalent terms. And again, there was no climate change then, there was nothing then. So,
well, Nikos, you're too young to remember it, but before it was climate change, it was global warming. And then before global warming, it was global cooling. And now they've just settled on climate change because that's the safe, it's like, and then now anything that happens with the climate, every storm, every hurricane, every rain, well, it's just very convenient to that, and there's that Garden of Eden mentality. Dr. Brooke has talked about this quite a bit, that idea that nature is this perfect Garden of Eden. And as soon as we eat that apple, we're violating it. We're the intruder in the Garden of Eden. And that's to me, it seems like a mythological idea that once again puts man as the sacrifice of nature, not the other way around. And by the way, I want to thank all these quickly thank all these super chats. Thank you, Sammy, once again. Enric, thank you. Sammy is all over it today. Thank you so much. Bonnie Mertran says altruism is crashing. I hope so. That would be nice. Mary Lynn says they are anthropomorphizing.
That's a Greek word, anthropomorphizing.
All right. Well, thank you. That one I can understand. The earth. The earth doesn't care a value to whom and for what, you idiots. It's exactly, that's exactly right, which makes a point that Rand makes over and over again. So thank you to all those super chatters today. And they understand the point quite well, Nikos, but we're alone. Objectivists, I think, are alone in this point. I mean, everyone has kind of accepted those premises that any use of the earth is wrong, that, you shouldn't use the earth. I mean, imagine if when the Americans got to North America, and the environmentalists would have said, "Oh, don't cut down any trees," or the Wright brothers would have gotten their plane going. They said, "Oh no, it's the same thing now. We're on the cusp of new innovations, new technologies that these Earth First people are stopping because they're against exactly that, humans' use of the Earth."
Yeah. Oh, I could talk a whole hour about the Earth First. I basically wrote my master dissertation on groups like the Earth First. But one last thing, which is very sad, you hear people discussing what would you do if you were going to the hospital and that these protesters in front of you, would you crush them or not? The thing is, the discussion shouldn't be that, because it should be self-evident that the police would remove them in the first 3 seconds. Like, why would we need to have the discussion whether the ambulance should go over them? That's the role of the police. But the problem is that in the times we live, the police have to make value judgments. So, for example, if a white nationalist would block the streets, obviously, and as it should be, they'd be kicked out within 5 seconds. But because these people, again, they are this, middle class, all of them, or 99% of them, this white middle class, kind-looking people, they get the leniency of the police. There was a video some weeks ago where the police was asking him, "Do you need anything? Let us know." So again, but of course, that guy said that, yes, I would stop an ambulance with a dying person. If you ask me, if it came to a case of emergency like that, what should one do? Go to part 3 of Atlas Shrugged and see what Dagny does when someone with the intellectual capacity, so to speak, which was something like that person, stands in her way, and when a brute tells her, "No, you can't pursue your value because I say so." But again, it should never reach this lifeboat situation scenarios, because that's the role of the police in a civilized society, that you don't have to make the decision, do I not run over that person, or does the person who I have on the back dies on my car? So it's the mere fact that we're having this discussion, I find it a sign of the time, which is unbelievable.
I'll say once again, just as we're wrapping up here, I mean, Rand writes about this and talks about this in her notes on political philosophy in Textbook of Americanism, that you don't have a right to use your body to block the public thoroughfares. That's what the public thoroughfares are for. So, once again, she foresaw this, the ecology movement, all these types of so-called protest decades in advance. And that's what we're trying to do here at the Ayn Rand Center UK. Nikos, great teachers like you, all of our roster of superstars, helping us learn and understand Miss Rand's work and apply it to our lives in the future.
Yeah,
So thank you for
students,
that.
not students, not teachers. At least
Well-
for myself. Talking about teachers, did you watch the episode with Onkar Gate and the Aporia kids? The one on God. I listened to it today. I forgot to tweet about. Great work. If you're watching, hats off. That was a great episode. So ARC UK is bringing the best students and the best teachers to your computer screen. So if you appreciate the work, the hard work that Raz and everyone is doing, consider becoming a member, sharing the content, supporting in any way you can. Go to Ayn Rand Center UK / anyway, I never get the link. Google Ayn Rand Center UK membership and you'll find it.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing that. I mean, I think, Nikos, so many of us were kind of on our own when first discovering objectivism. We've got viewers from not just the UK, but from around the world. Some of them are from, parts of the world where there really aren't many objectivists or resources around objectivism. So we're so happy to be that for people around the world, to be a community, all learning together as students of objectivism. So your support, every couple of bucks, every couple of pounds and shekels are making it happen. So thank you to our community, Sammy, Enric, Mary Lean, and Bonnie, and all the rest. And we'll see you back here tomorrow for